Mexico has a long and well-documented history of high-profile kidnapping cases that have made international headlines. One of the most notable ones being a mass kidnapping in which 43 people basically disappeared off of the face of the earth. September 26th of 2014 was a Friday in Iguala, Guerrero, Mexico. A group of over 100 students, young men, students who all attended the same college, were embarking on what should have been almost a routine protest trip. They were following a decades-old tradition, which was taking buses to travel to Mexico City, which was around a 2-hour drive, to attend the anniversary of one of Mexico's darker moments. It was the anniversary of a horrible crime that took place back in 1968 when government forces claimed the lives of many young people at an anti-government rally. So every year on the anniversary, a march takes place in Mexico City, and that Friday, a bunch of students were getting ready to make the drive to attend it. But by the time that the sun rose on September 27th, 6 people would be dead, dozens would be injured, and 43 students would simply vanish. What happened that night would become one of Mexico's most infamous human rights cases. It would spark international outrage and reveal the horrifying truth about who really controls Mexico. Because it is very highly believed by a lot of people that those 43 college students were ambushed by police, forced into patrol cars, handed over to a cartel, and never seen again. It is believed that the government, specifically the mayor at that time, was directly connected to the cartel, that his wife's family ran the cartel, and that police were essentially working for them. There's also evidence that the Mexican military knew what was happening and did nothing or worse. So the school that the students attended, it wasn't just any school. It was an all-male teacher training institution belonging to a network of rural teaching colleges established back in the 1920s, when Mexico launched a mass education plan to expand education throughout the country. These teacher colleges were scattered throughout Mexico, and students that attended to get an education and to become teachers. Many students came from different communities and impoverished backgrounds, and for them, these schools represented their only pathway to a better future. Now, the tradition of commandering buses might sound shocking to you if you have not heard about it before, but in Mexico, particularly in Guerrero, it is considered a well-known practice. Students would quote-unquote borrow commercial buses. They wouldn't rent them, they would just kind of take them with the understanding that the buses would eventually be returned, and they would use them to travel to these protests. It wasn't something that was necessarily allowed by authorities, but it was more so tolerated by them. It had been happening for years. On September 26, 2014, at around 6 p.m., more than 100 students from a teacher's college in Ayotzinapa left their campus to get ready to travel to Mexico City. They had 2 goals that evening: 1, to raise money for their upcoming trip, and 2, to find more buses. They had 2 that they had previously taken, but they needed more to be able to fit everyone who wanted to go. And again, these buses were not buses that they rented. People wouldn't ask for permission to use them. They would more so just find commercial buses and take them, or try to persuade or negotiate with someone who would let them take one. Earlier that afternoon, a group of students had attempted to take a bus but had been chased away by police officers. So after that failed attempt, they had to try again. And a group of them ended up in the outskirts of Iguala, about 50 miles away from where they lived. They had no intentions of going to Iguala initially, but the driver of another bus that they were attempting to take told them that they could take it if he could drop off his passengers that he already had at the local Iguala bus station first. So they followed him there. Once they were at the terminal, they managed to take that bus and also a couple of others in a matter of minutes, for a total of 5 buses now. They left the Iguala bus station in 5 buses at around 9:15 p.m., separating into groups and taking different routes as they headed for the highway to then return back home. So they had 5 separate buses, but they separated going 3 different routes, meaning that there were 3 different locations that the students were physically in the city when the attacks begun. And just so you don't get confused location-wise, the students had started at their school in Ayotzinapa. They traveled to Iguala, which was around 75 miles away, to borrow the buses from the Iguala bus station. And the plan was to take those buses back toward Ayotzinapa, where they lived, and then onward to Mexico City for the march. However, too many of them would never make it home. Very soon after they started driving, the students were intercepted by the Iguala Municipal Police Force, and in a series of coordinated attacks that took place over the course of the next 3 hours, all 3 groups of students were ambushed by security forces in the area. The attacks were carried out primarily by the municipal police from Iguala, but the federal police, state police, and some of the Mexican army, they were also there, and they at times participated in what they were doing to the buses and to the students, which felt really weird because all of those different forces were there, almost as if they knew exactly when the buses were going to show up because they were there at the exact times that they needed to be at to stop them. The police opened fire on the buses. The windows were all shattered, the tires were punctured, the luggage compartments had been opened. Students started to scream, yell, some even tried to flee to save their lives, others tried to help their wounded classmates. It was pure and utter chaos. By the end of the night, students 18-year-old Daniel Solis Garrardo, 15-year-old Daniel Josué Garcia, and 18-year-old Israel Caballero Sanchez, 40-year-old Blanca Montiel Sanchez, who was a passenger in a taxi that was caught in the crossfire, and a bus driver by the name of Victor Manuel Lugo Ortiz, had all lost their lives. Another one, Aldo Gutierrez Solano, had suffered a horrible injury to his head and was left alone on the ground, found in a horrific condition, and later put in a coma with only a 20% chance of survival. Other students did manage to flee and escape the attacks alive. But a group of 43 students that had witnessed everything with their own two eyes, they were pushed and escorted into police vehicles and never seen again. It also wouldn't be until the next day, September 27th, that the body of another student, 22-year-old Julio Cesar, would be found in the middle of a busy street, making the total number of casualties 6. His face and his eyes had been torn off intentionally, his skull had also been fractured, and his organs had all been ruptured, and finding him in that way felt like the brutality was meant to send a message. The families of those 43 students declared them missing people. Families and surviving students immediately began trying to locate the missing students, going to jails and police stations, but having no luck. An investigation was opened, and that investigation became one of the most complex, twisted, and controversial investigations in Mexican history. Because again, even though it has never been confirmed and probably will never be, it is highly believed that what happened because of the relationship that the mayor and his wife had with the cartel and with the police. Mayor Jose Luis Abarca and his wife, Maria de Los Angeles Pineda Villa, have been referred to by locals as the imperial couple of Iguala. They ruled a city of 150,000 people with an iron fist, and they did not rule it alone. It is said that the mayor ran the city of Iguala like it was his own personal operation, that he and his wife were not just shady politicians, but also directly embedded with the cartel. Maria's brother were very high up in criminal organizations, aka very high up and very powerful in the cartel. And allegedly, the cartel groups that they were a part of were attempting to take over Iguala. And people believe that the mayor and his wife were essentially just a political cover for allowing and enabling the cartel's operations in the area. The cartel essentially ran the town of Iguala, with a mayor allegedly receiving payments of 2 to 3 million pesos every few weeks as a bribe to essentially allow the cartel to get away and do whatever they wanted. The cartel even decided who became a part of the police force, and the mayor basically allowed that, meaning that the local police officers were not just shady, they were actual cartel employees. Under Jose Luis Abarca's tenure, Iguala had changed. Quote, "Crime has just been terrible since Jose Luis Abarca took over. Iguala has never been like this before," end quote. An Iguala city councilwoman by the name of Sofia Mendoza knew firsthand just how dangerous the mayor was believed to be. She actually strongly believed that it was him who was responsible for the death of her husband, who was a political rival of his, who was killed in a very, very brutal way. Quote, "This man had so much power, there was little I could do. I just had to take it. I couldn't bear to look at him anymore." A witness even gave a statement to state prosecutors identifying the mayor as the person who killed Sofia's husband, but prosecutors did nothing. And it made the public feel like the mayor was untouchable. In a video released during the investigation, the mayor's own mother-in-law confirmed that he was on the cartel's payroll, receiving $155,000 a month, again, in exchange for basically allowing them to do whatever they wanted to do with no consequences. And the reason why people believe that the mayor and his wife ordered these attacks on the buses is because that night, on the night of September 26th, his wife was giving a public speech announcing her political ambitions. The theory is that the mayor received word that a group of students who were protesting from Ayotzinapa were in the city and panicked, believing that they would disrupt his wife's event and publicly embarrass them both. He allegedly then picked up the phone and ordered the municipal police to stop the students by any means necessary. And because the police and the cartel worked together, stopping the students did not mean shooing them out. It meant handing them over. So once the police had the students in the buses, the cartel then took over and the students were never seen again. Just days after the students disappeared, on September 29th, the mayor, Jose Jose Luis Abarca gave a radio interview in which he said that he had no information about what happened, saying that he was at this event with his wife, that they went to an after party afterwards, and therefore he was busy dancing when the attacks took place. On September 30th, now 4 days after the students disappeared, Mayor Abarca and his wife asked the city council for a leave of absence. Neither was seen after that, reason being they had fled. The mayor and his wife had fled Iguala, which investigators said looked like the behavior of people who knew exactly what had happened and why they needed to disappear. They were arrested 39 days later, hiding out in Mexico City. Abarca was charged with ordering the attack on the students, and his wife was charged with ties to organized crime. But from my understanding, they are both still in custody. However, their legal situations have become this extremely complicated situation, and honestly, who knows what's going to happen with them. Furthermore, at least 56 other people were also arrested in connection to this case, including 22 Iguala police officers, around a dozen of soldiers, and the former attorney general. However, almost all of those detained have been released, but these arrests, they did not provide the closure that people were hoping for. In fact, for a lot of people, it felt like it was only the beginning. On November 7th of 2014, Mexican Attorney General Jesus Murillo Caram gave a press conference announcing what he called to be the historic truth, the official government version of what happened to these 43 students. According to this narrative, the students were handed over by police to members of the Guerreros Unidos cartel. The cartel then took them to a garbage dump in a nearby town of Cucula. They were killed and their bodies were burned in the dump. Their ashes were then placed in plastic bags and thrown into a river. The government claimed to have found plastic bags containing human remains by a river in Cocula Guerrero, but that historic truth pretty much fell apart when more and more information started to come out and things were just not adding up. And then so many different layers to this case started to come to the surface and different new theories began to circulate. A lot of people in Mexico believe that those 43 students saw something that they were never meant to see and were killed as a result of it. Another theory is that those students were kept alive in a warehouse for days and then turned over by a local army commander who then ordered them to be killed. Another theory is that one of those buses that the students had taken was carrying a big shipment of illegal substances belonging to the cartel, that the students accidentally took it, and that the entire attack on them was just a cover-up designed to protect the movement of the substances that was going on and eliminate anyone who could identify what they found. But what really happened to those 43 students after they were taken remains officially unknown. Only one student, Alexander Mora Venecio, has been positively identified through remains. A possible match also exists for a second student, but the other 41 have never been found. Their families continue to fight for them, to search for them, to figure out what really happened to them, but it breaks my heart to say that all of these years later, there are still no answers. Yeah, there are so many different layers and theories and beliefs in this case that I hope I explained it in a way that makes sense. Heartbreaking, none of the less. But that is it from me today. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope that you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.